All right, class, we are still in the factoring mode, and today's lesson is going to look a lot like yesterday's lesson. But we're going to look now at continuing factoring patterns. So we're continuing factoring patterns like we did yesterday. Okay, but today, C is going to be negative. Okay, so that means the constant term on the end is going to be negative. So here's my X marks the spot again from yesterday. If you look here, I've got, when I multiply two numbers together, I get negative 35. But when I add those two numbers together, I get negative 2. Can anyone think of what my two numbers are? Right, it's got to be negative 7 and 5. When I multiply negative 7 and 5 together, I get negative 35. But when I add them together, I get what? I get negative 2. Now, if you look, this is my binomial today. And if I FOIL it, this is the trinomial. That's the product. That's the result. But what's different today from yesterday? Well, if you notice what's different, I got different signs. I've got one is plus and one is minus. Okay? And so that's what's different. So let's go through our little scenario like we did yesterday. Okay, when I look at my trinomial, where did the x squared come from? If we're going to use the FOIL method, what part of that method did the x squared come from? That's right, it came from the first times the first. Now, here it is. Where did that negative 2 come from? Yes, remember, that's the outside and the inside, but this time, when I did the outside, it was 5x, and when I did the inside, it was negative 7x, and remember, if we're adding them and they're different signs, what do? Yes, we subtract and put the sign of the greater. And we're going to see that today a lot as we go through. And then hopefully we remember that the negative 35 comes from multiplying the constant terms on the end. All right, so my honey-do list is going to look a lot like yesterday's. Pretty close to what we had yesterday. All right, so if I look here then, remember my quadratic coefficient is going to be 1. And there it is. It's an understood 1. Okay? But my constant is negative. So we're going to have a negative constant on the end. We still have to list the factor pairs of our constant. We're going to find the factor pair whose sum equals the coefficient of the linear term in the middle. We've got the same sign chart that's going to help us today. And then we're always X factor to check the linear term. Again, we still have to check the middle. Check the middle to see if we have chosen wisely. All right? So we're going to use our template again like we did yesterday. Let me get it up here. All right. And let's write down our first trinomial that we're going to factor today. And it's going to be x squared minus 5x, okay, minus 24. Okay, so again, we said our C value is going to be negative. But first rule of factoring, we've always got to check for that GCF. Do we have a GCF? No. Okay, so we're going to write it down again, and then we're going to look at the coefficients of my different terms. Okay, remember, my quadratic value for A is always 1 right now. Did you see our B value is negative 5 this time, and the constant is negative 24. Okay, let's write down our factors for 24. We've got 1 and 24, and 2 and 12, and what do we got? 3 and 8, and 4 and 6. Okay, so those are the factors. Remember, we have to worry about two things. We have to worry about the factors of the constant term, and the other thing we worry about is our signs. So if you notice, this time they're both negative. So let's see where we are in our chart. Well, C is negative, so we're here. And then, but B is also negative, so we're here. Okay? So we're here. So it says the bigger factor is negative. So we're going to have x. We're going to find out when the back term is negative. When the back term is negative, okay, we always need one of each. Okay, so we're going to have one to be plus and one to be minus. So now, because we have different signs, okay, because we have different signs in our binomials, what do we do when we're adding? If we're adding and they're different signs, remember we subtract and put the sign of the greater. So yes, so today, when we look at our set of pairs, we need to subtract them. Which set of pairs, if I subtract them, will give me 5? Okay, well that has to be 3 and 8. Now, here's the important part. We've got to look. B is negative. We've already said that. B is negative, so that means my negative value needs to be 8. And my positive value needs to be 3, because when I subtract them, the sign of the bigger wins. So pretty close to what we did yesterday, more attention to signs. Let's try one more. Let's go ahead and try one more. Let's try this one. Let's say we had x squared plus 2x plus 8. All right, let's go through our template. Is there a GCF? No. Okay, we'll write it down. Okay, what's my quadratic term? Its value is 1. This time b is positive 2. And this time, oh, Mrs. Burton wrote it down wrong, I think. Yes, I did. This is supposed to be minus. Sorry about that, friends. All right. This is supposed to be minus and minus. So this is negative 8. All right. So again, we're looking at our signs. All right. So what are my factors of 8? I'm going to go here first. We got 1 and 8 and 2 and 4. Okay. So let's look at what happens with our signs this time. C is negative, so I'm here. But B is positive this time, so I'm here. So now the bigger factor is positive. Okay, so we know we're going to have an x plus something, and we're going to have an x minus something. And now let's look at our terms. Which set of terms, if I subtract them, will give me that 2 in the middle? Yeah, it's got to be 2 and 4. But my middle term, my linear term is plus, so that means this needs to be plus and that needs to be minus. So we're going to put plus 4 and minus 2. So very close to what we did yesterday. Okay, very close to what we did yesterday. We've just got to pay a little more attention to signs to help us with the linear term. Okay, so let's take this back now, okay, and see how we're going to put our x factor in, okay, to do the problems. Now, let's go ahead and look at number 2. Let's go ahead and look at number 2. So when I look there, all right, I've got my factors of v. Well, my factors of v are v and v. Now, we're going to see whenever that back term is minus, whenever it is, I always need one of each. I need one to be plus and one to be minus. So now, what are my factors of 4? 1 and 4 and 2 and 2. Now, which set of those two factors, when I subtract them, will give me 3? Well, it has to be 1 and 4. Did you notice my linear term is negative? If my linear term is negative, then 4 needs to be negative and 1 needs to be positive. Again, so now let's x factor and see if we've chosen wisely. Here we go. So we've got negative 4v. 1 times v is 1v. If I add those together, see, different signs, subtract, put the sign of the greater. That's why the bigger number has to be negative. And so we have chosen wisely, so my answer is v plus 1, v minus 4. Good job. Now we actually already did this one on our template, so we'll skip that one. And let's go down here and look at number 6. Let's look at number 6. Okay, so we need our factors of u squared, which are u and u. When we look at our signs, as soon as we recognize that back sign is negative, one of my binomials has to be plus, and one of my binomials has to be minus. Now, we've got to come up with our factors of 9. It's going to be 1 and 9 and 3 and 3. And remember, because I needed one of each, because I have 1 plus and 1 minus, we have to subtract our factors over here. Which pair of those factors, when I subtract them, will give me 10? That's right, none of them will. None of them will. So what happened yesterday when no set of factors works? Well, this is going to be prime. Okay? Nicely done. Okay, let's look at number 10. Let's see if we can do it. Factors of p squared have to be what? P and p. When I look at my signs, whoop, as soon as you see that back one's minus, one has to be plus and one has to be minus. Factors of 18, we've got 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6, I think. Okay? Which pair of those factors, again, because these are different signs, I have to subtract this time. Which one of those, when I subtract, will give me 7? That's right, 2 and 9. Now, let's look. 7 is positive, so that means my 9 needs to be with the plus, and my 2 needs to be with the minus. Now, it's real important that we X factor these to make sure we have the signs in the right place. So here we go. P times negative 2 is negative 2p. Positive 9 times p is 9p. When I add those together, we get 7p. So our middle checked. So final answer is going to be p plus 9, p minus 2. Awesome. Let's try a few more. Let's look at number 14. Let's look at number 14. So here we go. Are you figuring out Xbox now? So we need our factors of t squared, which are going to be t and t. Remember, next thing we look at is the signs. As soon as I see that negative 40 back there, I know I need one of my binomials to be plus and one of my binomials to be minus. That also means when I come up with my factors of 40, which we're going to do right now, 1 and 40, what do we got? 2 and 20, 4 and 10, and 5 and 8. That means I have to subtract those guys to get 16. So when I look there, which pair of factors of 40, when I subtract them, will give me 16? Ah, that's right, none of them. None of our set of factors works, so this one is prime. All right, let's look over here at this problem. Are you ready to try it? Again, remember I've got p squared on the front, q squared on the back, but that's okay. We did that yesterday. We learned what to do. So what are my factors of p squared? Well, it's going to be p and p. When I look at my signs, that back one's minus, so one has to be plus and one has to be minus. Factors of 45. Can you already tell what's it going to be? 9 and 5. Now look, it's positive 4 in the middle, so that means this needs to be positive 9 and negative 5. And because it was q squared, we got to put the q's on the end. Okay, we always X factor to see if we've chosen wisely. So, negative 5q times p is negative 5pq. 9 times q times p is positive 9pq. And when I add them together, did the middle check? It sure did. Okay, so our final answer is going to be p plus 9q, p minus 5q. All right, now, let's look at this last problem right here. I want to go here right now. Let's look there. Okay, there's three terms there, so we need to factor. I'm hoping. Do you notice something right away? Yes. Good job. Did you realize that this one has a GCF? It does. So since this one has a GCF, the first thing I have to do is factor it out. Well, what is my GCF? Yeah, my GCF is 4. How do we find the factors that remain that go back in the parentheses? What do? Yeah, that's right. We go back and we divide each term by the GCF. So, the first term, if I divide by 4, gives me x squared. The second term, if I divide by 4, gives me negative x. And the third term that I divide by 4 gives me what? Negative 12. Hey, yeah, that makes it easier for factoring. Now look, the factors that remain, there's 3 of them. Okay? So what do we do if we have 3 terms? Oh, I've got an x factor. So here we go. What are the factors of x squared? We've got x and x. If we look at our signs, did you notice the back one's minus? So we need one to be plus and one to be minus. Factors of 12, 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. Remember, because my binomials are different signs, I have to subtract over here, subtract my factors. So which pair of factors when I subtract will give me 1? That's right, 3 and 4. Now, the linear term in the middle is a negative 1, so that means it needs to be negative 4 and positive 3. Remember, good algebra students always X factor to check the middle. So we've got x times negative 4 is negative 4x. 3 times x is 3x. If I add them together, I get negative 1x, so the middle checks. Now, final answer. You got to remember to bring down that GCF, and then we've got x plus 3, x minus 4. Okay, so remember, I'm just trying to get you to understand the pattern, but don't forget rule number 1. Always check for that GCF. Okay, class, you can begin your homework.